Privyet, comrades! You clicked on the title and you're wondering, wait a minute, is Angie pulling a Dave Rubin or an Ariel Scarcella and leaving the left? Well, that's where you're wrong, bucko. I'm left of the liberals. But I wasn't always like that. No, once upon a time when I was a teenager, I was a proud, self-proclaimed liberal who would even throw the socialist label on for fun sometimes. I didn't even know crap about politics. How did I get there? Like a lot of people in their politics, I was influenced by my own family. Everyone in my family is a liberal, and that's all I was ever exposed to as a kid, except in school, where I had conservative classmates and teachers. My family would watch MSNBC, listen to NPR, read the New York Times, and feel like they're good people who care about poor people and minorities. And honestly, I don't think anyone in my family is a bad person, or evil, or malicious. I think they can be a bit misguided politically, or they're just going with their class interests. Which, well, I don't really blame people totally for that, because I think that I'd be singing a whole different tune if I were rich. I'm just being honest. People are selfish. I am now a working class person who lives under the poverty line, but it wasn't always that way. It's not fair to you guys, and it isn't a fair representation of being working class if I'm not honest with you about my upbringing, and I can take this opportunity to reflect on the privileges I had in my upbringing. Growing up, I came from a well-off enough family. We had a nice big 2-story house, 2 cars so we never took public transport, lived in the suburbs, went to really good public schools with up-to-date technology and nice facilities, never worried about money and food. Even when my dad lost his job, he had savings, we traveled a lot around the country, and my parents paid for my university, and I don't have any student loan debt. My parents instilled in me the importance of going to university and getting good marks in school, and that's the pathway to a good job, which isn't exactly true, but I digress. I am quite lucky compared to other Americans my age. I had class privilege growing up. I know people who've been disowned and had to pay for everything on their own starting at 18. People had to work all the way through school, people had student loan debt, all sorts of situations that can lead to someone living in poverty. Because of my upbringing, I lived in a bubble and I was naive to all these experiences. I didn't know any poor kids. I didn't know what it was like to live paycheck to paycheck. Is it any wonder that I was a liberal who believed in, well, if you work hard, you'll be fine? It seemed to work for all the people around me, but I was blinded by class privilege. Is it any wonder I was a naive, elitist liberal? It wasn't until university that I started meeting working class people and empathized with their struggles better, living paycheck to paycheck, balancing school and a job, having to survive long commutes on public transport, depending on free food given out at school events and from the school pantry. But what really woke me up was living working class and seeing it firsthand. My husband is a PhD student and makes barely anything, and most of his wages go to rent and bills. We basically live hand to mouth. But we manage to have some savings. Because of my disability, it's hard to find work, and I've been discriminated against in job searches, so I'm left creating my own work by writing. I now understand the need for workers to unionize for better wages, the need for rent control, the need for UBI, the need for a proper healthcare system like the NHS. Ireland doesn't have that, contrary to popular belief. Over time, I've become more and more socialist and wondering why liberals and normies think it's such a bad word. I want to thank the Phil Oakes song, Love Me, I'm a Liberal, for waking me up and showing the differences between a true progressive and a fake progressive. I also want to thank Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign for lighting a fire inside me to keep fighting and speaking the truth. I also want to thank people like Crystal Ball, Jimmy Dore, and Kyle Kulinski for influencing me. That's enough of my own personal story. In this video, I'm going to talk about 10 reasons why I no longer identify as a liberal and talk about my problems with liberals. And when I say liberals, I mean people who are like establishment Democrats, neoliberals. As a teenager, I would have proudly called myself a Democrat, but now I'm a proud, independent, left-wing libertarian. Now let's go on to the 10 reasons. I'm just here to vent, and it's really about problems among liberals as a whole. All of these reasons will interconnect with one another because there's a lot of connections and overlap in politics. Number 1, corporatism and warhawks taking over the Democratic Party and Obama's disappointing presidency. Even when I was a teenage liberal, I at least knew Obama was a slight disappointment. I remember 2008 quite well. I was 13 and I was old enough to finally understand the election coverage and the issues better. It was Obama versus Hillary, and I was rooting for Obama and his whole slogan of change. Yes, this is what we've been waiting for. He seemed like a liberal dream. A black man who talked like a populist about the issues working people care about, the economy and healthcare. So many promises. Hope, change, yes we can. Diverse people of all ages and backgrounds supported him. His 2008 campaign is what I thought America was all about: unity, change, hope, restoring faith in our country and our system. When he was elected president in November 2008, I was going to a conservative secondary school, and I sat in my teacher's classroom watching his inauguration at lunchtime, and I was so happy to see history, our first black president. Little did I know, he would be a huge disappointment, and my smug liberal ass would try to defend him anyway, because Republicans bad, and what other alternative do we have? At 14, I knew he was giving up on fighting for universal healthcare, ending the wars, and a better economy. Why did a lot of bailout money go to corporations and not the people? I even asked this question then. Not much changed in these respects, but I didn't understand why he was such a disappointment. The liberals all around me said that Obama's trying his best, and that's what I went with. But now I know better. I was wrong. He had betrayed the people by being buddy-buddy with corporations and surrounding himself with those kinds of people. Did anything improve race relations-wise in America? No. Police brutality was as common as ever and became even more visible to us thanks to smartphone video. The Black Lives Matter movement started under Obama. People are still dying because of no health care. Wages were stagnant. 2 times Obama voters were growing frustrated, and some went to Trump in 2016 because they felt they had nothing to lose by going with someone different. War is a waste of money, and there are no true winners in war. The reason liberals love war so much is because America can be on top and be the world police, and because rich people have an interest in the military-industrial complex. Money is everything in this society, and green is the color that matters the most in this world. If you have money, you can buy so many things. Peace of mind, power, opportunity, comfort, you name it. The only nice things that I can think of with Obama's presidency was gay marriage being legalized nationwide, but remember, Obama didn't support it in 2008. We need to thank the LGBT activists who pushed our politicians to support marriage equality. The other thing was ending the embargo with Cuba. And Obama was one of my favorite presidents to listen to. His speeches were very inspiring. However, they are full of platitudes, and listening to them a decade plus later, it doesn't have the same magic, because I know better now. Over time, it took me to realize that these politicians only stand for corporations, not people. If I were in America right now, I would run for office, but I'd be a PR nightmare because of my bluntness and my temper, which would only rise if I were surrounded by these rich wankers who virtue signal. America isn't ready for me. Number 2, obsession with civility. As a communications major, I knew that framing and messaging is everything. Tell the same thing to someone in 2 different ways, and they can react totally differently. I know the importance of framing in politics, going to criticize my side here, but I prefer, instead of defund the police, I prefer framing it as police reform and investing in the people to prevent crime. The media has had a meltdown over Trump for the last 4 years, and not exactly about his politics, but more about his lack of civility, his tirades on Twitter, his angry tone. Sure, liberals speak out against the wall, but didn't Hillary Clinton want to build a fence? What's the difference? Didn't Obama and Biden deport more people? Didn't the children in cages start under Obama and Biden? Didn't NAFTA start under Bill Clinton? What are Democrats doing about outsourcing? Nothing. They just don't like that Trump acts like a kid on Twitter. Honestly, one of my main sources of entertainment was laughing at Trump's tweets. All the Democrats care about is weaponizing politeness and civility so they can tone police the left. They yell at us going full Karen, but they go soft at Republicans and don't yell at them. We're too angry and rude, asking not to be killed and asking for healthcare and relief from student loan and medical debt. And the thing is, the Democrats will also bang on about bipartisanship in the bad way by working with respectable Republicans, rehabilitating their image, compromising with them, and even including them in their cabinets. Biden is no Democrat. He's a Reagan Republican. You see why we call it Blue MAGA? One way that the liberals will weaponize civility culture and tone policing against the left is when they cry about the Bernie bros and the Markey bros being mean by tweeting snake emojis at Elizabeth Warren or making jokes about Joe Kennedy's family. Oh, how dare you! Shows that they care more about rich people's fifis than the needs of the working class. Snake emojis don't offend me. The fact that people are starving, homeless, or housing insecure and can't afford healthcare offends me. Politicians and the rich should be ashamed of themselves. Meanwhile, the K-Hive are notoriously toxic and have come after independent left-wing voices, and no one demands that Kamala Harris rein in her supporters. Reminds me of that one meme about Republicans versus Democrats. Can we have healthcare, please? Republicans say no angrily. Democrats say no with a smiley face and a heart. What's the difference? They both hate the poor, but the Democrats are somehow better because they're less dicks about it. This is why, in a way, I hate the Democrats more than I hate the Republicans. Everyone remotely close to the left knows how bad the Republicans are. But when I complain about the Democrats, they don't believe me, and they act like I'm a Republican. Guess what? I'm on neither party's side. I'm an independent. Number 3, culture war and virtue signaling. Now, this isn't only a problem among liberals. I see this on the progressive left too, and the right of course, but I think people on the progressive side of the left are way more genuine about it and more responsible about their advocacy. This point is all about hypocrisy, which I see all over the political spectrum, but because this video is about liberals, I will be focusing on their culture war and virtue signaling. Liberals, especially rich white liberals, are all too happy to get involved in the culture war to pander to minorities, even though minorities don't ask for them to get involved. It's the easy thing to do. Lose the battle on cultural issues, but win the class war. Do enough symbolism and hope the people are bamboozled. Paint rainbows all over the place? Sure, not a problem. Pronouns in bio? Sure, it was nothing at all. Paint all the letterboxes black for Black Lives Matter? As you wish. Paint black Trans Lives Matter on the road in front of City Hall? Your wish is my command. Mention disabled people in a speech? Not an inconvenience for us. You want us to take a knee in Congress wearing kente cloth and shout Wakanda forever? It's the most we can do. Because don't you dare come into our offices and call us corrupt and lazy for not solving problems in society. Because that's disrespectful. Don't you know how hard it is to be a politician? See all these gray hairs and wrinkles I've dyed and Botoxed away? All these culture war and virtue signaling moves is self-indulgence to make the wealthy feel good about themselves without giving up a slice of the pie. These rich people are more than happy to tweet, "Thank a black woman today for Joe Biden winning the election," but will they do anything substantial for black women? Nope. Improve their material conditions by investing in education, healthcare, libraries, parks, and things that will improve working class people's lives? That's a utopian pie-in-the-sky ideal, say the liberals. Then the liberals will virtue signal about incrementalism and pragmatism and fawn all over these performative photo ops that do nothing. Some thank you non-white and mixed women get. Why do we even vote for these assholes? Well, I at least don't. It's like a humble brag. Look how underprivileged they are and look how privileged I am. How about you go give up some of that privilege? Oh no, too far? It's a good thing this video isn't a safe space. It's all a virtue signal, a distraction, and just plain insulting for the groups they are trying to pander to. Do they really think that all we are these identity labels like ethnicity, gender, and sexuality? How about instead of just shallow pandering, you actually do things that improve the material conditions for disabled people, ethnic minorities, and LGBT people, poor people as a whole across the board? Everyone benefits from higher wages, universal healthcare, affordable housing, and a good education. Just acknowledging groups of people is lazy, and being impressed by that shows that you either have no standards or you're privileged. And I think that's sad. Number 4, identity politics takeover. You ever notice how liberals love to talk about identity, but only race, gender, and I guess to some extent sexual orientation, and possibly religion, depending on if they decide that Jewish people are oppressed that day or not? And even then, race relations talk is only black and white. Asians who? Natives who? We only recognize them on Indigenous Peoples Day. Latinos, they're basically white now. Mixed people, let's bring out the paper bag. You're darker than the paper bag, you're a POC. You're lighter than the paper bag, you're a disgusting whitey. I don't think it's bad to talk about identity. Who you are in society does shape your life experiences, but it definitely isn't all that people are. There's more to you than a bunch of arbitrary labels made up by human beings. The way liberals will do identity politics is they will weaponize it to suit their agenda, just like conservatives do. They don't care about reducing economic inequality. They're happy with the oppressive system that we have now. They just want the oppressors at the top to be more diverse, which is why you'll see a lot of "Yas Queen, more black, trans, autistic, amputee, drone pilots of color" chant. They see black capitalism, female capitalism, Hispanic capitalism, and rainbow capitalism as a solution to the current capitalist system. They love seeing diversity in the military, but they won't question why America acts like the world police. Why is it that we always have money for war, but when people ask for healthcare and education and things that are good for them, the liberals and conservatives will say, "There's no money for that, you dirty commie." The liberal politicians don't work for the people. They're sucking the dick or licking the pussy of the corporations. As you can see, I account for different sexual preferences as someone with both homosexual and heterosexual attractions. Liberals weaponize identity politics to shield politicians from criticism, and it's so dishonest and insulting, as if all they see is skin color. I see this most often with Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. It's racist to criticize them, apparently, even if you have legitimate reasons like them being corporate sellouts, fake progressives, and warmongers. And since Kamala Harris is the next VP, I think it's time to be honest about her record, because I am done with this whole narrative of Kamala Harris being so amazing and historic for black women and Asian women and women as a whole, because she's the first black Indian female VP. Stop with the narratives comparing her to Rosa Parks and Ruby Bridges, and don't you dare mention her name in the same sentence as Martin Luther King, who was a socialist. Here's the truth about Kamala Harris, whose first name is Finnish for terrible. She has laughed about locking up the parents of children who miss school for a variety of reasons, let Catholic Church get away with pedophilia, let Steve Mnuchin get away with scamming working people with his predatory lending practices, kept prisoners locked up even after they were supposed to get out so they could be used as slaves to fight wildfires in California, jailed thousands of black and Hispanic cannabis users, and laughed about legalizing weed, supporting 3 strikes laws, and supported building more prisons instead of putting more resources into schools. Never forget that at the debates, Tulsi Gabbard ripped her a new one and called her out for what she is, a cop. Tulsi Gabbard's call-out ended Kamala's failing campaign for president, yet she failed up because the Democrats crowned her a queen, because there's clear favoritism towards people who further the interests of the rich. Is it racist of me to say that? I didn't even mention her ethnicity. Just her failings, and I have done the same to crooked white politicians like Joe Biden. I've tweeted this before, but I will tell you this. White liberals absolutely love me until I start speaking out. Why? I'm a minority who looks white, so I don't look intimidating to them, but I look minority enough to be their little sidekick and minion. I tick enough diversity boxes that they'd be thrilled to have me run for office and be the first XYZ. That is until I reveal that I am no sellout, and I'll always stand with the working class and not be a puppet of the aristocrats. Then I become Satan. Funny how that works. I'm too honest to be a grifter, so I can't infiltrate their club, but why would I want that? They sound like boring people anyway. Well, I guess if you criticize me, you're an anti-Semite, anti-Indigenous, anti-Hispanic, anti-bisexual, ableist, classist, checkmate liberals. Or is it okay to criticize minorities who disagree with you? Pick one. I believe that no one is immune from criticism. Unlike Dave Rubin, I genuinely believe in the battle of ideas and the marketplace of ideas. You are welcome to disagree with me. In fact, I encourage it. Number 5, elitism and casual classism. This is where liberals show they are just like conservatives, but cool with the gays and immigrants, I guess. But even then, their support is conditional, only if you agree with them. It really feels like liberals hate the poor more than they hate conservatives. All over Twitter, I will see blue checks and neoliberal wine mom Karens spewing casually classist attitudes, like calling Middle America flyover country, looking down upon the South as a whole, and making sweeping generalizations about the region based on the way the votes went in the Electoral College, and not taking into account voter suppression, which they will virtue signal about. Making fun of how poor people live and look, and looking down upon blue-collar workers and those without a university degree. I grew up around elitists like that, and those attitudes became so normalized to me because I was in such a middle-class bubble. The sad truth is, even middle-class people are closer to homelessness than to being a millionaire, and especially to being a billionaire. The rich have tricked them into thinking poor people are the problem. Why do liberals think that if you laugh at poor and working class Southerners and people who live in non-coastal areas that they'll want to vote for you and not the Republicans? These areas aren't inherently conservative, and there are many people who belong to marginalized groups who live in these areas, and looking down upon them for things they can't help, like where they were born, doesn't encourage them to stay on your side. If anything, it might make them apathetic and apolitical and hating both parties. It's really privileged to ask Southerners to move because moves cost a lot of money, and also people need jobs in the new place they're living. It also ignores the issues in coastal areas and northern cosmopolitan cities. California is a beautiful state, but it's got its problems. High rent, homelessness, heavy traffic, inadequate public transport. The North still has racists and racism. Here's a fact. Chicago is the most segregated major city in America. Cities all across America are being gentrified and becoming more and more expensive for people to live in, and poor people are becoming displaced. No one can afford to live on their own, making minimum wage, and working full-time. That's a difficult pill to swallow. How can someone go to university, or college, or trade school to improve their life if they can't afford it in the first place? No question about it. Post-secondary education must be tuition-free, and debt must be forgiven. People deserve respect no matter how much money they have or what job they work. I believe in giving everyone health care, a living wage, and tuition-free post-secondary education, even if they are conservatives, or liberals, or apolitical. What happened to civility and equality? I guess they go out the window when it's people you don't like. Drop the smug attitude and elitism. It's a turnoff and only divides people more. Number 6, casual racism, hating progressive, non-white, or mixed people. Liberals like to think they can't be racist because they're not conservative and they're not in the KKK or whatever. One of my favorite Martin Luther King quotes was from Letter from a Birmingham Jail, and it was about his frustration with the white moderate and how they are a bigger barrier to progress for black people than literal white supremacists. When I was a liberal, I didn't understand the quote at first, but as I've moved further and further left, I understood it better and better. Basically, I think the way a lot of white liberals treat minorities, I have to be careful not to generalize here about every single one of them, but I see this as a recurring problem. White liberals will treat minorities like a pet, prop, token, or sidekick. They will treat them in a condescending and patronizing way, and then throw them out like yesterday's rubbish when the election season is over and you are no longer useful to them. It goes against basic human respect and decency, which is something the liberals will claim to be all about. We are people too. We deserve to be treated equally and fairly. We don't want special treatment. We want a seat at the table, and we want to be listened to, not just heard. I notice how liberals hate progressive women of color, for a lack of a better term, like Tulsi Gabbard and Nina Turner, more than they hate women like Nikki Haley or Candace Owens. Funny enough, if you criticize one of their woman of color poster children, like Kamala Harris or Neera Tanden, you're a racist. But they're not a racist if they criticize Tulsi or Nina. Funny how that works. As we say in Spanish, tu sí o no? Have a look at Brianna Joy Gray, Cori Bush, or Nina Turner's mentions, and you'll see a lot of white K-Hive Karens hurling insults. I remember one time seeing someone call Brianna and Nina Bernie's version of Diamond and Silk. How insulting and racist is that? And where is the call for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden to call out their racist supporters? I've never seen them call out their supporters for saying racist things towards black progressives. White liberals love people of color, so long as they vote and think exactly as they do, and they don't question anything. But if they don't, they will shout at them saying that they've internalized racism and they are secretly privileged or that they hate themselves. Liberals will act like they are entitled to black, Hispanic, Native, and Asian votes and act like they know best. But when it comes to helping out poor black, Hispanic, and Native and Asian communities, where are they? They will talk big talk about how we should thank people of color for getting out the vote and creating a supposed blue wave. But how do they thank them? They don't. They just virtue signal and pat each other on the back like one big self-congratulatory, self-indulgent circle jerk. This fetishization of non-white and mixed people and obsession with skin color is something that creeps me out, and it feels like the noble savage trope, but woke. I will see liberals post things like, "We owe black women and brown women. Thank a black or brown woman today. Good morning to black and brown women only," or something like that. Add a bit of condescending inspiration porn of women of color accomplishing things, and liberals will make it more about the woman's identity than her accomplishment. Funny enough, most of the time when I see things like that, it's white people who are fawning all over it, I guess in a way to make up for their white guilt or something. It's really just cringe. Stop apologizing for who you are. Just be a good person, treat people right, treat people normally, and with respect. That is all. No one asked for special treatment. If you're all about listening to people of color like you like to say, you would cut this crap out. Ready for a hot take? I think covert racism is worse than overt racism. Why? Because when it's overt, people know how bad and how serious it is. But when it's covert, no one believes you. They act like you are reading way too much into the situation and seeing racism wherever you go. People act like, how can that person be racist? They're a liberal. I really hate race reductionist identity politics, and I think it's really hurt the left. Number 7, pushing people away over small disagreements. It's funny, I've had more arguments with liberals than I have with conservatives. Maybe it's that whole idea of the narcissism of small differences. One of the tendencies of liberals that I really don't like is that they will push people away over a small disagreement. Most recently, people have been distancing themselves from me over the fact that I don't support Joe Biden or establishment Democrats and I question the vote blue no matter who narrative. Of course, they can't win me over because I'm adamant and very strong in my ideas. But what if they push people away who are fence-sitters or are just unsure? How does that win people over? This just polarizes people and pushes them away from your side. Best case scenario, they stay apolitical. But worst case scenario, they end up being radicalized by the far right. I think the other thing I want to see people stop doing generally is to stop guilt by association. My personal approach is to not push away liberals or Trump supporters. Here's why I don't do that. I want people, and not just those who agree with me, to listen to me and what I have to say. I know I can't change someone's mind overnight, but perhaps I can plant a seed. And what happens when you plant a seed? It eventually grows into a tree or a flower, but it takes time. Patience is key, understanding is key. From a young age, I had an interest in true crime and psychology, and I'd like to find out why people think the ways they do. I don't want to push away people who disagree with me. You know why? Because I want to understand them. The better that I understand them, the more effectively I can counter their arguments. Know how the other side think. Know what makes them tick, but also know yourself and know what you stand for. Number 8, the new Red Scare. In the news, it's been Russia this and Russia that. Are we still in the Cold War? It definitely sounds like it based on the way people talk. Americans can be such hypocrites. Don't judge all Americans by their government, but oh, it's okay to do that to Russia and other countries that the American government don't like. Aren't we all human at the end of the day? What does this say to the Russian and Eastern European diaspora in America, that they cannot be trusted? You see a last name that ends in ov, anka, ich, or ski, and it's don't trust them? Isn't that kind of prejudiced? What about people like me who have a fascination with Russia, but really don't like the government? Are we evil? Can't I just listen to Victor Soy and watch Bald and Bankrupt videos in peace? Even when I was a liberal teenager, I wasn't afraid of the word socialism, and I thought it sounded like a pretty neat ideal to aspire to. Humans are really adaptable people, and if anything, 2020 showed us that. People are afraid of change, though. In America, a lot of attitudes are normalized. Lack of work-life balance, no mandatory paid time off, and if you don't work, you're lazy. If you're poor, it means you didn't work hard enough. Welfare makes you a leech and a failure. Healthcare isn't a right. Higher education isn't a right. And even liberals who claim to care about the poor buy into these ideas and don't even try to unlearn them. I see liberals talking crap about socialism and Marxism without knowing what these words mean. One time I saw this neoliberal call people like me apolitical Marxists. Girl, pick up a dictionary because Marxism is political. Believing in Marxism means that you can't be apolitical. Also shows that they've never read Marx or even a summary of what he believed in. Now, I don't think Marx was perfect, and of course the world has changed a lot since his time, but he made a lot of good points and his writings are still influential to leftists. A couple things about Marxism that really influenced my way of thinking is that we are ultimately divided by class. The color that matters the most is green. Money buys comfort, privilege, opportunity, peace of mind. The other thing is that we have to think about who owns the means of production. Now, of course, I don't think the government should own everything, and we don't have to go full-blown communism to have a system where workers have more say in their workplaces and get treated fairly. Workplace democracy can work in a capitalist system. Things like unions, collectives, and cooperatives can be seen in capitalist and social democratic countries. Remember that FDR was so popular that Republicans had to bring in term limits because they knew they were no match for popular social democratic policies. Imagine if he lived longer. Perhaps America would have had their own NHS-like system. Wonder if UBI would have been talked about sooner. There are capitalist arguments for these elements of socialism. UBI, given to working class people, goes back into the economy and stimulates it. A healthy, educated population can do more for the country, be more productive. When workers are treated right, morale goes up and they care more about the company. And that means more profits. It's unfortunate that we on the left have to be careful of our language, because I don't think socialism is something to be afraid of. But America is a very strange place, and framing is everything. Number 9, incrementalism and arguments to moderation. One annoying logical fallacy I will see a lot from liberals is the argument to moderation. Everyone from classical liberals to neoliberals will say something like the truth is always in the middle, or the middle is always the most rational. I swear, it's something I've heard Dave Rubin say, and I've heard the same crap from liberal family and friends. However, liberal family and friends of mine will just claim they support the same goals that I do. But they're pipe dreams that incrementalism is good because it's moving in the right direction. And of course, any move in the right direction is good, but we have to keep pushing for change. But by starting off as a moderate, you're never going to get the change that you want. Think of it like you're in Mexico or the Caribbean or the Middle East, and you're at a market. The first price you're going to get is going to be a ripoff. You're going to want to negotiate that down, but you can't negotiate well if you don't ask for enough off the original price, and that puts you in not as good of a position to get a good deal. Democrats straight up do not know how to negotiate because they will start at such a right-wing position that they end up doing whatever the Republicans want anyway. I will expand on this in the next section. Perhaps this is why we need to step away from the political compass and talk about policy. Forget about grids and charts. Policy needs to come first. Let's talk policy, not party. Arguments on political positions and issues need to be about the value of the idea, not about where it falls on the spectrum. If it can't stand on its own merits, then maybe it's not a good idea. My positions aren't inherently far-left communist positions. I talk about why I believe in what I believe in, and I use facts and logic to explain my point. However, there are certain things that you can't be incremental or moderate on. Looking at history, think of slavery, segregation, women's suffrage, labor rights, or even modern-day issues like marriage equality, climate change, and universal healthcare. Let's look at the moderate approach to these issues. For marriage equality, civil unions, but isn't that separate but equal? Climate change, keep fracking and keep our dependence on oil, and focus on that while we barely make progress on green energy? Universal healthcare, keep means testing, and I suppose expand Medicaid, and maybe lower the Medicare age to 60? Thanks, this is breadcrumbs. No, not even that. Atoms. People need change, and now. We can't afford to be incremental or moderate on climate change. We only have one planet, and we need to do something now because time is running out. We can't be incremental or moderate on healthcare because people die every year because of a broken healthcare system that leaves people in debt and has millions fall through the cracks. And people die every year because they can't afford the care they need. How heartbreaking is that? You wonder why people don't vote Democrat and are apathetic. Maybe because time and time again, both parties have demonstrated that they don't care about common people. Stop telling them that they are privileged. How about you use your privilege to advocate for the working people? Listen to them, give them what they want, and you'll win elections. Stop being the corporation's bitch. Number 10, Republican light and cozying up to Republicans. There's no question about it. The Overton window has shifted so much in the last 70 years. Isn't it crazy that Republican President Eisenhower is to the left of current Democrats? I wouldn't be surprised if JFK and LBJ would be called socialists by current Democrats. I mean, Biden is basically Reagan, but blue, and the only reason he's considered blue is because he doesn't hate the gays, which is such a bare minimum thing. Being slightly left-wing on social issues shouldn't be enough to be progressive. If you don't, at a bare minimum, support Medicare for all, UBI, getting money out of politics, and tuition-free university, I'm going to question your progressive credentials. Litmus tests are good sometimes because words have meanings. Progressive means something. The establishment of the Democratic Party and their bourgeois wannabe lemmings are so out of touch with the common people and are trying to reach out more to white rich suburbanites who are former Republican voters rather than trying to go back to the days when they were a party for the working class, and we all know why that is. Money. These suburbanites have money. Working class people don't. Money is everything to politicians because they need money to be reelected, and reelection is everything to them so they can have a cushy job in Washington and be in that ivory tower. It's not just politicians who are part of the corrupt system. It's also the pundits on TV like CNN and MSNBC and all the mainstream outlets. They will defend the status quo and call anyone who criticizes it a problem, accuse us of being Russian spies and secret Republicans. You're either with us or you're against us, I guess. The other problem I have with this rightward shift is the rehabilitation of previous Republican presidents, especially during the Trump administration. Remember when the media hated George Bush? And now they love him. Like when Ellen DeGeneres called him her friend. I'm sorry, but I can't be friends with war criminals, Democrat or Republican. And I'm even seeing people rehabilitating the image of Reagan, where liberals are taking pride in being like Reagan. Oh, you mean the guy who allowed AIDS to kill a whole generation of gay and bi men? Who supported the apartheid government in South Africa? Who said classist things about poor single mothers being welfare queens? Supported dictators? Committed war crimes? Yeah, no. Enjoy Reagan's movies, sure, but don't idolize his politics. It's upsetting how Biden is buddy-buddy with Republicans more than he would include progressives in his administration, considering the fact that progressives did all they could to get him into office. Why bother helping these liberals out when they will spit in our faces and throw us under the bus? We don't need them. Stop helping these people out. They need us more than we need them. That's why I'm no longer a Democrat or a liberal. Goodbye. To quote a song lyric by Victor Soy, close the door behind me, I'm leaving. Peace.